Everybody, and welcome to another episode of Eating at a Meeting. I'm going to try to get that stick out of my head or the wall out of my head. I am live from Nashville, and I am just finishing up a program with a client of mine. And we actually came live from this event last year. I'm very excited about it. We just wrapped it up. We had 1,400 people, and we, over the course of 4 days and multiple food and beverage events, I was actually in charge of exhibits at this event. So a much different experience for me in doing that. And but it was fun. But I want to talk about today a variety of different things that I've seen over the course of events that I've produced and attended in the last couple of months. So I produced an event, managed food and beverage in Orlando in May, and then I produced an entire conference in June in San Antonio, and then I'm here in Nashville managing exhibitions for this event. But a lot of different things that have come up across the board, food and beverage wise, and just event management wise. I mean, I'm not just food and beverage. I've been managing events for 34 years, 33 years from start to finish. And so there's lots of things that come into play when you're managing events. And with what from this event itself, I want to just bring a couple of things in, talking food and beverage or not talking food and beverage, but talking exhibits. Excuse me. One of the things is the waste. So we have a trade show. This show has about 45 exhibitors in it. And I was chatting with the cleaning crew, the one-man cleaning crew for Freeman. And he came in and he was emptying all the garbage cans and everything, and I was helping him and talking to Terry about it. And I learned a lot from him on the amount of waste that events produce. And he actually works a different event as well that comes to Nashville every year. And it took him 4 days to empty that event's garbage. 4 days. Because they had to they filled the dumpsters had to get emptied, and they had to fill them again. And it's just breaking down boxes and sorting plastic, and just the leftovers that people leave in their trade show booths. And he's like, it's a dirty show coming in. It's dirty in the middle of it throughout the entire thing. And it's only a 5-hour event on one day. And all the trash that is left behind. And, eating at a meeting is about safety, sustainability, and inclusion. And this really is about sustainability. We as event professionals really need to hone in on how much trash that we leave at our events. Because if you think about it, we're just assuming that the hotel is taking care of it and the city's taking care of it. We're not charged for any of that stuff. But I think we need to be better stewards of our trash at events, right? What are we going to do with all those cardboard boxes? Can they be recycled? Can we ask our exhibitors to reduce the amount of plastic that they're shipping their items in? I actually watched one exhibitor at our show. They got their nice gift that they were giving out to everybody, but those gifts were packaged in plastic, and they had to take every single one of them out, probably about 500 of them, out of the plastic, and then the plastic's just going in the trash. So how can we minimize that trash and that plastic, when we're designing our events? And I need you to listen to, a conversation that I had with Lindsay Ariel a couple of months ago, and I'll find that link and give it to you. She works with the Natural Products Expo, and they are doing a really good job of managing that plastic in that event. And it's a good conversation to listen to see what she has done and how to, I'm going to put this in the chat here, what they have done to help eliminate the plastic at that event. And that's a convention of 80,000 plus people. So listen to Lindsay and see what she has to say about that. But we really do need to work on that trash aspect of the event, and thinking through how we're going to manage it. And I do want to give a shout out to my AFR team and the Freeman team who were here and helping me with exhibits and furniture we created an event lounge in the trade show floor that looked beautiful. And one thing about that, in thinking about the waste of things, last year at the event, we ended up buying our furniture from IKEA and then donating it to local schools. And this year we rented it from AFR, and so they will be picking it back. So the sustainability of that is huge. I mean, yes, we did buy new furniture and we did donate it to a local school, so it is being reutilized. And that principal says it's amazing how the kids love that furniture. But sustainability wise is reuse, reduce, and recycle. So by renting our furniture from AFR, we're actually reusing furniture that's used all over over and over again. So it's not being thrown in the trash or wasted. So that's a really good way to think about, if you're trying to show sustainability practices, that's a way to think about that too. You're reusing that furniture. Same thing with different kinds of decor and things like that. The signage from this event, I am working very diligently to get it donated to a high school right down the street, so that they can use it in their arts. It's an arts program as well as their drama program, so that they can use that signage for creating decor and stuff in the drama program. So thinking through those waste that waste, and I think I've mentioned it in another event, another session, is my event in San Antonio. Again, um, we managed that waste. We had a bunch of signage there, and I donated it to the local youth theater and to a local high school as well, so that they could reutilize it and save costs. So we have some of the waste that we can do is just giving back to our community so that they can reduce their costs and utilize things that we reuse, things that we've already used. Um, and here at the show too, we had a lot of excess bags that we were handing out at registration, and I checked with our catering team here, event services team, and they connected with the HR officer here at the hotel, Grand Hyatt. And the Grand Hyatt is actually knows partners in the community, and they're donating those bags to those partners in the community that they already have a relationship with. So really loving that. Those bags are not going into the waste, into the trash. And so I'm excited about that. This week, let's just change subjects and go to food labeling. I had some great conversations with the Hyatt staff here. Let me see if I can pull up any pictures that I took of their signage, but it prompted me to ask a question this week on LinkedIn and Instagram about labeling and how do we label our food. And I'm going to preface it. Let's see, I'm going to pull this up real quick. I'm going to preface it with, hey, this is, how do you, I'm prefacing it with the food code. So the US food code was updated in 2022 to say that they recommend that we label for what allergens are in the food, the top 9 allergens that are in the food. So I loved this is a picture of the Grand Hyatt's labeling, a sample of it. So they have yogurt and it says it contains peanuts, it contains dairy, and it's vegetarian. I like these icons. It was, it's about a 3-inch by 6-inch card. I really liked the way they did that. Let's see if I have another one. Here is a Neapolitan overnight oats. Again, it's vegetarian and it's vegan. So looking at that, does not say that it's gluten-free, and it does not say that so looking through that. But on that note, we were talking about consistency with labeling. And again, do we list the allergens that the food contains, or do we list what it's free of? And so that's what I did with my poll, this week on Instagram. I asked that question as well as on LinkedIn. I'm going to show you the results from the Instagram poll here. Um, so, how do you prefer buffet label IDs allergens? And this is from Instagram stories. So, 50% of people want you to list the allergens that the food contains. The next option preference was 27% want you to do both options, which means listing what it does contain and saying what it's free of. So, like if item number one says it's gluten free, and but item number two contains gluten, they want you to say that it contains gluten, and they want the other one to say that it's gluten free. So doing both options. There's a lot of big conversation been happening on LinkedIn when I posted this about how that would potentially bog down the line. I'm going to take this off. And with people walking through the buffet, trying to determine how much, what's on the buffet, what's in the food, what's not in the food. Some people have requested that they put the entire ingredient list on a buffet. And I'm not a fan of that, for the fact that we already have long lines, going through the buffet. It's not like we're going to go to a Whole Foods and there's nobody standing behind me, waiting to determine what they're going to eat on that buffet, right? It's usually, one or two people looking at that hot buffet item line at one time. Whereas on an event buffet, we've got tons of people that are looking at the buffet at one time, and we're going to hold that line up. So my suggestion, my solving that problem, is make sure that you list all the ingredients of the food that you're serving on a PDF that's on your event app, or that it's also listed on your event website, so that every attendee has the option to go look at that before they get to that buffet and before they get to that event, so that they can then ask questions of your culinary concierge, if you have that, or the person that's managing food and beverage. It's really important to have somebody that manages that. And on that note, I was talking to my friend Paulina, about food and beverage. And she said to me, she's like, I hate managing food and beverage. I'm like, why? Because I love it. And she's like, well, she hates choosing the food and beverage. It's really hard to choose food and beverage for an event for 1,500 people with a variety of different dietary restrictions and a variety of different events. And so, how do you mix and match that, right? And she realized that she had ordered the same food for almost 2 consecutive days. And it came out because the hotel has, I'm talking really fast, the hotel has the Monday through Friday same meals, and a lot of hotels are going that way. So on Monday you're served this dish or this menu, and Tuesday you're served this menu, and Wednesday you're served this, and you get a discount for ordering those pre-designed menus per day. Well, they don't have those pre-designed menus on Saturdays and Sundays, so they were able to discount it and they took that from there. So really looking through it, food and beverages, something that needs a lot of dedication to. It is not as easy as just checking off a box, right? You have, I think she said 15% of the attendees had dietary restrictions. So that's about 200 people at this convention. And so how do you manage all of those things while also giving a good selection of food options throughout the event? I mean, you've got breakfast, you've got breaks, you've got lunches, afternoon breaks, cocktail receptions, seated dinners, plated lunches. How do you manage that? I actually asked that question in my Eating at a Meeting Facebook group this week. How do you manage, food and beverage for multiple day events with multiple simultaneous food and beverage functions going on at one time? It's really a challenge. It's like my event in April. I think we were 4 days and we had 40 food functions in those 4 days. Think about that. 40 food functions in 4 days. That's like, we've got a CEO lunch here, and then we've got a break here and a staff meal here and a different breakout here, or this is a private luncheon that's happening for the group of CEOs, etc. How do you manage all of that and thinking through the food and beverage selections? She did tell me that I apparently traumatized her like 20 years ago talking food and beverage. And we were working a convention, and when I was in-house corporate, and she I walked into an after party, the evening function after the fact, and everybody had just eaten dinner. And then we have all this other extra food for them to eat. And I'm like, why do you have so much food? Right? That's just way too much food. Well, she said the surveys had said there wasn't enough food last year. So you've got to weigh those things too. How do you weigh what attendees want more food, but then again, are you giving them things that are hearty enough to sustain them that they don't need that extra food, right? But we don't need to be eating every single minute, every single day. And actually, I got a text message from my friend Aurora, and she was doing a food waste audit, and she figured out that I don't know if it was for one food function. I think that that hotel or that venue, with their entire menu of that buffet, was 4.5 pounds of food per person. 4.5 pounds of food per person. Nobody needs to eat that much in one sitting, right? Think about how much you actually eat. Take your plate, weigh it on a scale at home, right? How much do you actually eat in one day? But we do not need to be serving 4.5 pounds of food per day, per person, or per food function per day. So kind of really thinking through those things. And again, it's understanding, when are people going to eat? When are you feeding them? How much are you feeding them? And do you need to constantly reinforce them to do that? But it is our number one expenditure at events, and we need to pay more attention to it. It really is. It does come down to understanding how much food is being ordered, and how much food is actually being wasted. Like, how many people attended that event? And we had an event, we've had a couple events. Actually, my event last month or 2 months ago in San Antonio, my catering manager, she's like, "Well, you're not ordering food. You've got 500 attendees. You're only ordering food for 275 people. What are all the other people going to do?" Well, all those other people take their clients out to lunch. And my client actually had 5 years of history showing the actual consumption of food and beverage at their events. And so now we order based on the number of people that actually come through the door. Managing the percentage of that. And it's not just saying, "Hey, 250 people came out of the 500." We track that percentages, whether it's 37% or 40% or 50% or 75%. And my client from back in May as well. We're managing based on percentages of those attendees, so that we know if your registration goes from 600 to 800, we still know that only 47% of your attendees are going to eat at that food function. It's really important to track those numbers so that you know that you're not ordering excessive amounts of food. And then talking about the labeling, I jumped in a variety of tangents here, but let's go check over on Instagram too. I put this live on Instagram. Where did it go? Um, hey, Margaret. Um, she replied to me too, saying that having an ingredient on the PDF is a great idea. I think so too. And it's easy. It's not cumbersome, right? It's hidden in an app, and I don't want to say hidden, but it's there for attendees to utilize, and being able to ask questions about it, and doing that, providing that information. And it does take a lot of forethought. It does require chatting with the kitchen up front and making sure that they've got the ingredients completely across the board on what's going to be served. And I can tell you stories about, different recipes, how that recipe changed from what was put on the buffet. And I actually had an allergic reaction to that, because that hotel had two different recipes with the same name, and two different people were making it in the course of that whole function, which is very, very scary that can happen, right? But if you provide, and I think there's a story of ASAE, Association of American Association American Society of Association Executives, who posted their menus in advance one year, and I don't know if they still do it. I need to check in with them. And it helped reduce the number of special, of personalized plates that they had to order because they were letting people know in advance what was going to be on the menu so they could actually navigate those buffets. And to think about it, that's what a restaurant does, right? A restaurant's menus is there. It's not necessarily coded, but it's, with different allergens or including that, but it is there for us to peruse before we go. And if you're saying, well, I don't want my food to be, if this is a special event, everything's a big surprise. Telling people the ingredients in the food or just labeling, hey, that you're going to have a hamburger and it's going to served on a sesame seed bun with lettuce and tomato and mustard, already pre-designed. That's not giving away the surprise of of that event. Use that as a tool also to engage people to come to that event, especially if they've got dietary needs. And I mentioned this, I think 2 weeks ago. My friend Dave went to a convention 2 months ago, and he walked in and he was looking for non-alcoholic options besides soda, and they didn't have anything. And so he skipped that entire reception because there was not anything for him that he wanted to, a beverage wise to participate in an event. And that could be another thing too, is like, hey, we've got, you know, different athletic beer, and we've got, these spiritless spiritless cocktails, that are going to be offered as well. That entices people to say, hey, I've got options. I can fully participate in this event. Um, but I really, those are a couple of things that I wanted to point out on food allergies and stuff. And well, actually, and another thing is communication. I mentioned Dwayne, and I mentioned Terry, who from AFR and Freeman, but I also want to recognize the culinary teams, the front of house teams, the banquet staff. It's really, really important that we engage with them as well, and educating them on how we want our event to be presented, and the knowledge that we want them to have when our attendees come into that food and beverage function, right? Um, and Margaret's got celiac disease. So Margaret, I'm calling you out, but you talk about it all the time. Um, you know, how what is Margaret how are those attendee or those servers going to be able to address Margaret's questions, right? Hopefully we've got that PDF with the allergen ingredients in it, right? Or the ingredients in everything that we're serving. But how do we want them to address her or to be able to answer her questions? And one example that I have from my event in June in San Antonio is that it was written all over our BEOs that there were no nuts allowed in any of our food functions because we had somebody who was anaphylactic to nuts, and we wanted no nuts to be served at anything because she was a contact nut person. And my banquet captain, he noticed that or he wasn't even a banquet captain, he was the server. He noticed that the plate of pastries that came out on day one breakfast, two of the four of them had nuts in them, had walnuts or something like that. They had some kind of nuts in them. And he had the empowerment. He was empowered to, hey, Tracy, I'm removing these muffins or these pastries, and I'm going back to the kitchen and changing these plates out because we there's not supposed to be nuts served at your events. And I love that because he and I had a conversation. It was also on his banquet event order in all caps that said no nuts at these events. So he saw them and he took them back and he made a change and he made sure that that happened. And I think that's really important. Those are the teams that are front of house, that are interacting with our attendees, that have the questions and see what's happening. We need to empower them to be able to do their job successfully and, with pride, because he was very happy that he caught that. And I took his photo, I thanked him, and I'm like, and I thanked this, and I told his boss, I'm like, I'm very proud and respect the fact that he did that for my attendees. So we really need to make sure that we're empowering the servers and any of our banquet teams, in understanding what their role is in successfully executing our events because they are the ones executing it. So we need to help them do that as best as they can. Um, let's see, a couple of other things that, so it's the labeling I talked about, the food waste, managing that. How much food waste do we have? Do we have excess? I do know that the Grand Hyatt here works with, I think it's Feeding America, to donate that. And actually, that's a whole nother talk. Let's go back to my event in San Antonio. I there was the staff was refilling the food 5 minutes before that event was supposed to end, because they were trained to make sure that all of the chafing dishes were full. That event was ending in 10 minutes, 5 or 10 minutes, and everybody in that class had already gone through the buffet. So there's no need for that food to be refreshed, right? And it wasn't even like three-quarters of the way empty, right? It was like a quarter empty, and they were still refreshing it. I said, "No." And I got in a heated conversation with my catering manager, like, "I don't want it to be refreshed." And she's like, "Well, we don't manage, we don't donate any of the food in the back, so it's just gonna go in the garbage can." And that I should have addressed that way in advance of my event, to saying, "I want this food donated." I should have found that partner to come and pick up the food from them so that it would be donated after the fact. But one of the things that she taught me, or said to me in that heated conversation, is that you're trying to change the way we have trained them. They are trained to make sure that that chafing dish is not empty. They are trained to make sure that the chafing dish looks full and plentiful, no matter if it's the first person to the last person that's coming through the buffet. But if you know that should not be the case when it's 10 minutes out, even 30 minutes out, and you've tracked how many people are coming through that buffet. We don't want to waste food. And if you can make sure that it's donated in the back of the house, if it's in the back of the house, time and temperature controlled, it can be donated to a local charity that feeds people. And that's what we should be doing, right? We should be doing that, which then reminds me of another conversation with a different event person. This was in Orlando, and I think I've mentioned this before, but she said to me, well, she wanted me to order every single item for every single person coming through that party. 600 people. She wanted and I'm like, no, that would be like Aurora's thing, that they're planning 4.5 to 5 pounds of food per person for one event. No, I wanted 1 pound of food per person. And I got that from a couple of catering friends. That's what they plan for, 1 pound of food. And she's like, well, our staff will just eat the leftovers and then we'll just compost it. I'm like, no, my budget for my food and beverage is not to feed your staff on purpose. If there is leftovers in the end, your staff can eat them, but I'm not going to over order so that I can feed your staff. That is not the goal of this. And the goal, even though I want you to donate food and beverage that is left over, time and temperature controlled, in the back of the house, the goal is to not have any leftovers in the first place. It's not that I don't want to feed people in the community. I do, but that's when there's excess. But if we plan correctly, there shouldn't be any excess. So, those are my thoughts from the last couple of weeks. Oh, no, one more question, one more idea. And this is about communication too with your attendees. I attended an event. I was the attendee, and I asked a question: how will people with dietary needs, be handled at your event? And the response was, I'm going to read this. I took a picture of it, um, so that I wouldn't forget it. Let me find it here on my thing. Um, and the response was great. And actually, my question was, oops, where to go? How will dietary needs be handled? And the answer was, great question. We have provided all allergens noted at the time of registration to every one of our catering partners. Alternative meal options will be provided to adhere to all dietary restrictions. That's great. But what does that mean? You've given it to your catering partners, and now you've left it up to your catering partners to decide what I'm going to eat or what's going to be served. But now I have no direction on what I'm supposed to do at each one of those functions that I'm going. And one function I went to was at the hotel, and the breakfast choice was eggs Benedict, which is an English muffin with an egg and sauce on top, right? And I'm like, "Can I get it and one of those things without the bread on it?" And the server's like, "No, we don't have any of that." I'm like, "Can I get some just scrambled eggs or something?" "Nope, we don't do that." So I actually had to leave that breakfast networking event to go into the restaurant and eat by myself so that I could actually have something to eat that I wanted to eat. There was sausage on the buffet, there was fruit on the buffet, but I actually wanted some eggs. But there was no option for me to do that. And that catering partner, that catering server is like, well, no, no, we can't do that for you. So it really left kind of a disgruntled, hangry person in me in that, and made me feel left out of that function. So how can you change that narrative to make sure, hey, here's a chafing dish of, ones with um English muffins on it, right? And here's some, and maybe it's just a smaller one, right? It's not the full thing, a large contingency of it. Or you hand them a ticket that says, "Hey, I'm got I can't eat gluten. Can you give me an egg sandwich without bread on it?" Right? Have a solution for that. You as the planner, we cannot 100% just leave it in the hands of our catering partners. And I'm not saying they're not capable. It needs to be a cohesive team effort to make sure that everybody's fed, because we don't want people to leave a food function because they're hangry, there's nothing for them to eat. Because the other aspect of it is they paid a lot of money to be there, whether they're an exhibitor or an attendee, et cetera. They paid a flight, they're paying hotel room, they're paying conference registration fee, and conference registration fee includes food and beverage. So we need to make sure that we're feeding them. And if you can't, have that conversation up front. You need to be looking at the food and beverage selections or identification of what attendees have shared prior to coming so that you can have conversations with them. Right? This is about building relationships and making sure that we're fostering an environment where relationships can be built between attendees, and the association or organization hosting it, and as well as the attendees who are exhibitors and attendees, and maybe you're trying to make sales there, etc. An event is an opportunity to foster relationships and create a bonding experience. So, okay, those are all my tangents, lessons that I've learned, and ideas that I have from the events that I've attended and produced over the last 3.5 months. Thank you for listening to me. And next week, I'm speaking at the Healthcare Convention and Exhibitors Association convention in Tampa. I'm excited to join them for the first time, opening keynote speaker for that event. So I will be coming to you live from Tampa next week, the day before my presentation. And the following week, I'll be home, but I will have just attended Smart Meetings Magazine's Smart Women's event, as well as speaking at their culinary um, event. I'll put some links in the chat for that. So, but thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you next week. And until then, stay safe and eat well. Thanks.